Incoming EC Web Setting Tutorial. Tutorial video number 9. Genset Settings. All genset related settings has to be done under the Settings. When you click on the Settings under the category, you will be navigated to Main Settings page. There you have the option to select Port 2 or Port 3. Modbus RTU communication for genset can be established only at Port 2 connection. Therefore you make sure the correct port selection for communication settings. When you click the genset you can see list of sub-editing menus for genset connection. On the same settings page you can see the power meter sub-menu for connected power meter settings. Power meter setting will be presented in separate tutorial. The first setting you have to start with on the list is measurement settings. This settings refer the load readings of the site when the controller parallel with PV system. Under the measurement the first editing is sensing method, which determines what power readings to base the calculated references. There are 3 options available. The options are sum of all phases, 3 lowest phase, and 3 sensing method. When you using sum all phases option, the control will work on the total loading of all phases not regarding any potential asymmetry. Using this method with asymmetrical loads and a low minimum genset load can result in a situation where the load on individual phase or phases gets very low with the risk of reversing. When you use 3 lowest phase the controller will identify the least loaded phase and multiply this by 3. This can be useful when load is asymmetrical and it can avoid the reversing risk during low load phases. 3 sensing option can be used when the load is symmetrical. When there are only one current transformer installed the controller can sense the load from only one phase and the ECPV2 will multiply the load sensed by 3 in order to get the total load value. The next editing under the measurement is GB feedback origin. This settings determines from which source the genset breaker position closed feedback arises. The setting has 4 options. The genset power or power meter will be used in case a power meter is used instead of direct interface to a genset controller. The input 1 of the power meter will be interpreted as genset breaker closed feedback. When interfacing to the genset controller, the genset breaker closed feedback will already be wired to the genset controller. In most cases it can be read directly by ECPV2. When you select the genset power, genset's breaker is closed position can also be detected on the power reading itself. If the power reads from the power meter that exceeds the threshold, both positive and negative, the associated genset breaker will be interpreted as being closed. EC logic option will be used for more complex electrical infrastructures. For instance, sectional breakers separating part of the gensets from the PV plant. In such a conditions whether the gensets are connected at all to the same AC busbar section as the PV needs to be taken into consideration. During this complex installation the customization has to be done in the EC logic. When you use the Modbus page 3 selection, the ECPV2 will use the generator breaker feedback data which is written from a superior controller. Threshold value is the reference reading to the ECPV2 for detecting the genset circuit breaker position. If the value set to 0 kW then any value over 0 will tell the controller that the genset circuit breaker is closed. KW origin setting is the reference for the controller about how the measurement being interfaced on your site. If your generator production measured via power meter or the measurement directly interfaced with genset controller the selection will be genset meter. When you use the Modbus page 3 selection, The ECPv2 will use the generator breaker feedback data which is written from a superior controller. Kilowatt-hour origin determines from where to retrieve or calculate the genset energy production. Two methods will be supported. The ECPv2 selection will be used when ECPv2 integrates energy counters itself based on measured kW. When you use the power meters selection, the ECPv2 will read the total energy counter from the power meters and summarize the values. The next settings is references. The minimum genset load means that the genset production can be set in percentage in compare to its full production capacity. For instance, if you set 20% minimum load, then the controller curtail the PV production to maintain 20% production level of genset. Next settings is genset Q control. This settings represents how the reactive power being shared between PV plant and genset. Here you have 6 selections, which are All Q, All Q no limits, Fixed COSFI IDG, Fixed COSFI CDG, Same COSFI, and Sharing Q. All Q no limit means the genset will carry all the reactive load. Fixed COSFI IDG means the ECPv2 will keep a fixed inductive COSFI on the genset. The reference is determined by the COSFI IND setting. Fixed COSFI CDG means the ECPv2 will keep a fixed capacitive COSFI on the genset. The reference is determined by the COSFI cap setting. Same COSFI means that the ECPv2 controller send a reference to the PV plant to take reactive power to share the reactive load equally with genset. Same COSFI means that ECPv2 will produce reactive power, thus the genset and PV have the same power factor. Sharing Q means that ECPv2 will produce half of the reactive load. Genset will take half and PV will take the other half of the reactive load. All Q means that the PV plant does not carry any reactive load. Therefore all reactive load will be carried by genset until reach its limit. COSFI cap and COSFI IND outline the operating range of the gensets. This settings is applicable only when using the All Q setting. During this setting the PV plant will carry any excessive reactive power in order to keep the genset reactive load to keep within its range. Tariff setting is for calculate the export generated based on the genset generation alone. The efficiency is using for calculation the fuel consumption by genset as well as fuel saving by PV production. The price setting will be used to produce the report of fuel expenses consumed and saved by genset and PV plant respectively. And the emission setting will be used to calculate the amount of emission and emission reduction by genset and PV plant. Set your own tariff units in order to produce your reports. The next setting is for genset capacity. The rated settings will be used to enter the genset production capacity individually. Here you can enter the capacity of each genset you have connected on your site. The controller consider only connected number of gensets and the remaining gensets on the list will be ignored. On the next counter setting you have the possibility to set any preset values. Unless you have set any preset values, the counter values will be automatically updated by the controller based on the received readings. And the counter values will be presented on your reports for your own downloads. For your short explanation about genset settings, click on the settings of the EC Web categories. Then select port 2 and select the genset. There you have to edit all list of settings depends on your site installation. Remember to save all settings and counters before you move to the next editing options. Thank you for watching the video. This video presented by Nkumi. For more information please visit our website www.mcomb.com.